Hey, what's up fellas? Welcome back to the channel. I'm your host Paul, and earlier you saw Max on the gun. So we're back to talking LPVOs again, and since we just left the premium optics with the primary arms PLX, it's a good time to return to budget optics, and this time with a new name, Athlon Optics. Now, I'm not super familiar with Athlon, but from what I hear from the precision optics guys, these guys really know their stuff. So Athlon was gracious enough to send us one of their latest scopes, the Athlon BTR Gen 2 1:8 and second focal plane, and it's targeted for the budget optics market. So the obvious question here is, how does it stack up against some of the other budget optics we've seen? And does it bring some of its own features in this crowded space? Well, we're gonna find out right now, so let's go. Profile mounting. So first things first, let's take a look at this thing in profile. Now, the 30mm tube, when you look at it, it's very hard to tell the difference between other budget scopes. I mean, this looks like the primary arms SLX and the XP8 scope body. The knurling on the scope caps looks the same. The little raised fin you have on the zoom lever looks the same, although once you're inside the caps, it looks a little bit different. We'll talk about that more in controls. And lengthwise, it's about a 1/4 inch shorter than the primary arms. And weight-wise, it's about 0.8 ounces, so almost a whole ounce lighter than the primary arms. So that's 16.1 ounces total without the scope mount. And considering that 1:8s and 1:10s are moving towards heavier, more capable, this is a lighter, shorter scope. And I like that trend, so that's definitely a plus in my book. So speaking of mounts, you will need a 30mm mount for this scope. And because of its lightweight, you really can use any mount you want, fixed or QD. So if you want to go fixed, an Aero Precision will take you up to about 19 ounces total. But if you want QD, as you know, we really like Warren Precision mounts here because of their excellent QD lever and a skeletonized mount, so they make it as light as possible. So either way, we'll leave links at the bottom if you're interested in either. So once we got the scope mounted, I gotta tell you that it felt really good moving around with the scope on the gun, from swinging it from target to target. It felt really light and nimble. So I really like this movement towards shorter and lighter scopes. So here's hoping that we'll see more of those in the future. Controls. So starting with the first control, the adjustment turrets. These are cap turrets, covered turrets, which I really like for maximum security. There's knurling on the top, so when you're turning the scope cap, it's a really secure fit onto the scope body. As to the build quality of the turrets themselves, this is actually a step up from the previous primary arms SLX and Adderall XP8 lines. Kind of reminds me of the Swamp Fox in that way, and it's got really nice knurling at the top for easy dialing. The numbers are really easy to see, so you can see the MOA clicks between them. Speaking of clicks, they are 0.5 MOA between clicks, so it's 1/2 inch, 100 yards. So not the most precise, but it definitely worked fine from zeroing in our experience. And as far as feel in between the clicks, they do feel a little bit fragile. You got some play in between them. So once you set to zero, I wouldn't dial for these, as I'm not sure how repeatable the clicks are. Now on the back, you'll find the standard diopter and the throw lever, and the throw lever, the internal one, actually has a raised fin, very similar to the primary arm, so you can use it without a throw lever, especially since from feeling it, it actually spins really smoothly, so which is really nice. It takes you from 1 to 8 in about 180 degrees. On this scope, we're using the MK machining polymer throw lever, so it's really cheap and it works really well. Now on the left side of the optic, you'll find the brightness control, which takes you between the 11 brightness settings. The things you'll notice that it does not have an off position in between. And the knob feels pretty stiff to turn, so just know that you need to add a little bit more force than you're used to, but once you do set it, it's not gonna move. So if it's in your bag or something like that, it's gonna stay at whatever setting you last left it at. So one last note about the brightness control. Due to its stiffness, and since it doesn't have any off positions in between the settings, you're really only gonna use this scope in 1 of 3 positions. It's either gonna be off, it's gonna be 1 at the lowest setting, or it's gonna be 11 at the maximum setting. So once it's at its maximum setting, how's it look in bright daylight conditions like this? Well, we'll talk about that in the next section coming up. Glass and reticle. So when it comes to glass quality, I think it's really important to reset expectations here, especially since we're coming off the primary arms, which has Japanese glass. We're back to the Chinese glass of the budget optics, i.e. primary arms SLX, Adable XP8. Having said that, at 1X, the glass is not really that bad. Middle third is actually pretty clear, but once you start pushing out towards the center, towards the edges, it's gonna get pretty distorted and pretty soft pretty quickly. And once you zoom up to 8X or so, you're kind of really gonna notice that it's not the best contrast or color or detail you're gonna get out of the scope, but having shot it for some long range here, you can definitely still use it, no problem there. Just note that it does still have a 24mm objective end, so once you get past 6X or so, the picture is gonna get slightly darker in low light or dusk conditions. Now at 1X, you're gonna notice the field of view is actually pretty large. You're getting 110 feet, so that's really close to the Vortex PST territory. So that does make it quite easy to shoot at 1X, especially since the glass is relatively clear in the center and it's got a really big reticle, so it makes it easy to find during recoil. So once you power on the reticle, how's it look when it's at its maximum brightness level? Like the primary arms, it's just bright enough for twilight or dusk conditions. However, it does turn, a slight shade of red, so you do see that, but because the reticle is so large, it makes it really easy to see, even if you're not using illumination. So you've got these large index lines coming in from the left and right, and from the bottom, so just intuitively, you tend to center that on target so you can find it really quickly. At 8X, that half circle is 19 MOA across, but at 1X, since it's a second focal plane reticle, I don't have the exact measurements, but if you put it on a IPSC target, it will pretty much cover the A zone. So what that means is when you're shooting fast, as long as that circle is within the center area, you're gonna get a good hit out of it. Now, when it comes to shooting long range, once you zoom it up to 8X or so, what I do like is the reticle drops are very small. Even the center dot is 1 MOA and it shrinks down from there as you go down the BDC ladder. So it's really easy to shoot groups with this if you choose to. Now on that BDC ladder, you do have some wind holes in 5 to 10 mile an hour increments. And that takes you out to 600 yards. Now the manual does a great job of explaining the actual BDCs. However, as you guys know, you really should chrono your ammo, put it into Strelic, and get your actual holes. And the ATSR5 reticle is in the database. So once we plugged it in, we zeroed at 100 yards, and we found our holes were dead on.
200. 300. 400. Hit. 500. Hit.
So one last note about the reticle, it is calibrated for 69 grain ammo, and it is a 3-gun reticle built by Athlon to list for 3-gunners. So that warms my heart to hear that. So if you're playing that game and shooting at the practical distances for both close and long, then take a look at this reticle. All right, fellas, so what's the verdict on this Athlon Budget LPVO? Well, believe it or not, I think one of the hardest questions I get on the channel is, hey man, out of all these budget optics, which one would you pick? And what makes that really hard is that they share so much in common. A lot of them have the same scope bodies, or virtually the same. A lot of them have the same illumination, the same controls, etc. So what usually separates them is their reticle choice and their value. And in this category, I think Athlon's a very strong contender. It's got a really easy to understand, especially for a new person, reticle that's good for both close and long range shooting. And as far as value, it's priced in only at $300. So that alone is a deciding factor for a lot of people. So when you combine those, I think Athlon is a very worthy purchase in that regards. And that's the final verdict. Hopefully that's helpful. So if you found that helpful, please give this video a like, comment, and share so this small channel can keep growing. And as always, if you're interested in the equipment, I'll list it in the description. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you guys next time.